Oh, good morning. If anybody's out there, um, I'm not expecting anybody to really show up. I've only got 1,080 followers, so or subscribers. But if anybody does tune in, I mean, you're more than welcome to ask me a question. Just kind of give y'all a little heads up about me. I'm not a mechanic. Um, I'm actually an electrical inspector. Inspect new construction, roadway lighting, state U.S. highways. Um, I cover the whole state of Alabama. I inspect contractors' work. Um, I don't do much with existing systems. I'm assisting a crew in Birmingham, small lighting, but anyhow, um, but I'm a Ford guy. I think that's obvious from what I feature on my channel. Um, and if you get bad internet, if I fade out, it'll be because of the bad internet around here, rural Alabama. But I grew up. My next door, about three houses up, was a gentleman when I was a teenager. He restored early Mustangs, 65, 66 Mustangs. And man, I'd walk up there when I was 12, 13 years old, 14 years old, and I just, Mr. Holman, do you mind? He was restoring 66 powder blue, black vinyl top um, coupe Mustang, and then he restored a 65 dark blue metallic um, 289 two barrel automatic Mustang fastback 2+2. Anyhow, I'd go up there and I'd just stand in the doorway of his shop. He had a small shop, and I want to say Mr. Holman was retired from Ford as maybe a service manager, or I never really asked him, but super nice man, super intelligent. And we're talking 1980, 80ish, late 70s, early 80s when this was going on. How you doing, Manat? But anyhow, I'd stand in the doorway and I'd keep my mouth shut, and I wouldn't ask a lot of questions. I would just observe what he was doing. He was one of those guys that would walk into a shop and be clean when he walked in the shop, and he could work for hours. And when he walked out of the shop, he looked like he had just got out of the shower, just put on clean clothes. He did such neat, clean work. Complete opposite of me. I can walk through a shop and come out looking like I dove through a grease pit. Anyhow, but I watched him, and when I turned 16, well, my dad bought me a 1962 four-door Falcon, and I think he gave $50 for it. That was about 1981, and it was a heap. It run. I could drive it, but he said you'll learn to work on stuff because you'll need to know how to do this one day. So anyhow, I drove it for a few months, and Mr. Holman had a '66 coupe, 289. It had a three-speed in the floor manual. And I asked Mr. Holman. I talked to Mr. Holman. I said, "Would you be interested in selling it?" He said, "Sure." Um, he wanted $1,250 for it. I said, "Would you take this Falcon on trade?" And it actually had a 176 cylinder that he needed for a Mustang, and a two-speed transmission. He said, yeah. He said, I'll trade you. He said, I'll give you $250 for your Falcon and pay me $1,000 for the Mustang. That was way too much for it back then, but I was a kid and I was wanting one. If you had it today, you'd be. I mean, it was still original paint. It would be a straight body. So anyhow, had a little dent on the hood. So I went and talked to my dad, and Dad said, absolutely. He said, that's what I wanted you to do, to trade up to something nicer. So I'd go up and I'd pay Mr. Holman $100 a month. You know, you'd walk up to his house, sit down, you know, um, he would talk to you for 10, 15 minutes, ask you how I was doing, how my family was doing, you know, just being very neighborly, just super nice and cordial and formal gentleman. And so it's about 3 months after I bought it. I was still working on that Mustang, trying to get it driving. In the meantime, I was beating around in my dad's old '73 F100, and which God, I wish I had back today. Um, so I took. He had a '71 Mach 1 that somebody he had bought or took on a trade or something. It's green, dark green with, you know, uh, 351 Cleveland, 2-barrel automatic. Um, I think it's a 2-barrel engine, but somebody put a 4-barrel on it. Anyhow, I drove it. I took it for a test drive, and I said, Mr. Holman, I said, would you take the Mustang back on trade? He said, absolutely. He said, I'd rather have the coupe anyway. So that's when I wound up with a '71 Mach 1. My dad's father was a mechanic at the Ford dealership back in the 40s, 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, I guess, worked Model A's all the way up through the early 60s. He passed away at 67, so he passed at a young age. My grandfather did. But my dad never really got into cars. That wasn't his thing. So anyhow, but he had a good friend, Mr. Johnny Johnson. He had owned he done mechanic work his whole life. On the gas station. Back then, gas stations had mechanics. And he had an old chicken barn. It's probably, 150 foot long, 200 foot long, dusty chicken crap floor, that I don't think there've been chickens in it in 20 years, but anyway, he had a old wrecker back in there. He had all of his tools in there, and we pulled it in there, and Mr. Johnson was one of Dad's good friends. He showed me how to rebuild an engine. We took and tore it down and went through it. I mean, everything in new cam bearings, everything. And he showed me how to build it when I was 16 years old, and I'm glad he did. He showed me, he taught me a lot. And I learned a lot on my own, but he did teach me a lot. So we drove I remember cranking it up, breaking in the camshaft. We got like a Melling, very mild performance cam. Could use with a stock converter. So, hey everybody out there. So I remember pulling it out of the barn, and I'd forgotten how bad the chicken barn stunk because I was in there just about every day. And I remember bringing it home, and the next morning I came outside, got in the car, and it smelled just like the chicken barn. So it smelled like a chicken barn for a while, but I was tickled as I could be. Rolled the windows down, cleaned the carpet, cleaned the seats, cleaned the carpet again, cleaned the seats again. But it was a car I drove all the way through high school. We used to drag race some. I thought the 351 Cleveland 2-barrel engine with a 4-barrel, a set of headers, and a mild camshaft. I thought that was the fastest thing in town. And it was fast enough to run with the local Chevelles and Camaros. It wouldn't outrun the real hot rods, but, for all of us running, high 14 quarter miles, we were having fun. So anyhow, we drove through high school, through my first year of college, and dropped out of college. I decided, I kind of want to get rid of this thing. I traded for a 56 Ford pickup truck. Had a LV motor in it. They said it was a 428. I never really knew for sure. It could have been a 352, 360, 390, 428. I would have known the difference. And still wouldn't know the difference. So anyhow, I drove it for a while. Then, this new, well, I say it new, it was 82. It's 1986, I guess it was, 85. I went to work at Captain Chevrolet after I dropped out of college. And they had a Capri RS 5.0 4-speed. Looked just like a Mustang GT. To me, it actually looked better than a GT. Black, red accents, and interior. I said, well, you know what? I don't need this old truck anymore. Get away from this old stuff. Get this new hot rod. It's cool. Had 52,000 miles. It was by far the newest thing I'd ever owned. Had it, and as life goes, somewhere along the line, I ended up buying a 67 fastback Mustang. That had set, and after I got rid of the Capri, I bought a 63 Chevy 2. Like I said, I know I'm a Ford guy, but the car's pretty fast. A good friend of mine had built it, and another friend had bought it, and he's going to get the engine transmission out of it. I got it. It's pretty fast. It'd run high sevens in the eighth of a mile. Back then in the 80s, that was pretty quick. So, I drove it for a while, and then I got drunk one night after a football game, high school football game, and, my stupid years, and I was going through fast through a curve and flipped it over and totaled it out, and I didn't have a car. So the next morning, what do? Get the 6.7 fastback out that I've never driven. And we do one of those, back then we wouldn't call it will it run. It has to run. So I had a 289 2-barrel. We changed the plugs, did a tune-up on it, topped off all the fluids, changed the oil and everything. The darn thing cranked up and ran. I never knew if it ran or not. I had it for a year. And I actually had a garage apartment that I was renting, and it was down in the garage below. And thankfully I had it, and thankfully it run, and I drove that for a while. Then I built which I worked on my brother's cars too. He had a 68 Super Sport convertible Camaro, and it required regular maintenance, and he wasn't really a mechanic, which he ended up later building a beautiful 67 RSSS, and he became pretty handy, not mechanically, but aesthetically he could make one look pretty nice. Anyway, I know it's probably boring, short story long, but I ended up buying I sold that Mustang. Never really was attached to a car. I wish now I'd have kept it because of the value of it, but I got a 65. I had a 46 Ford Coupe that I drove around. And then pickup trucks, and what I drove mostly every day was a F-150 pickup truck. But I bought a 65 Comet, two-door hardtop, Caliente, and I decided to take the next step in building the car, so I built a 12-point cage for it. Put a back half frame under it, tied into the front frame rails, the unibody frame rails. Came back, put a ladder bar, coilover suspension, big fat Mickey Thompsons. Had used Galvalum for the floor pans and wheel tubs. That the guy built all that for me and installed it. And I had it all the way down to literally getting the engine and transmission in it, and then somebody come along and decided that they wanted it. So guess what? I sold it. And I was kind of out of the car business for a long time. And I moved to North Carolina, left my state job, and became a whitewater river guide and musician. If you look back at some of my first videos, you can see where some of my music video stuff that where we play bluegrass music, gospel music. So, as time goes on, my dad had Parkinson's, so I moved back from North Carolina to be closer to him to help Mom out. And got to get my coffee this morning. So I found another 65 Comet. Started building on it, and I actually never got it finished. I found a 289 down in near Pensacola, Florida. Bought it, found the correct 4-speed for it, which those have the special tail shafts for the Comets, Falcons, early ones. Did a disc brake swap, the Granada disc brake swap, which had the Kelsey Hayes type pistons and all on the calipers. And somebody had a fair paint job on it, and I was on a message board online, and somebody saw it and said how much they liked it, and they were really looking for a 4-speed Comet. I bought the trans tunnel hump from Kreitz, and I never got it finished, but this guy was like, hey man, sell me the car. He was from Kentucky, and I'm like, well, I didn't really want to sell it, didn't know how to price it, but he had enough cash to agree to a price, so sold it. Bought an old Bronco, bought a 73-ish Bronco, and did a couple of 4-wheel drives. And I said, well, I want another car again, because my brother had that beautiful Camaro, and so I was looking for whatever. I'm a Ford guy, so I really didn't have any parts anymore. Didn't have a whole lot of tools anymore, but I just built me a little shop and was going to get back into working on them. So I found a 68 Torino GT formal roof. No engine, no transmission, but the body was straight, and it was only had its second coat of paint. Found a engine, actually a 289 out of a 68 Mustang that the guy was going to convert to a bullet car. Engine, transmission, had 60-something thousand miles. Drove all the way up to Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and bought it. Came back, dropped it in, and run fine. And then ended up buying a later model 302 with a little roller motor with a set of AFR and meds. Drove for a year and a half, 2 years. It was fun, but it really wasn't the car I wanted. I liked the fastbacks. I really wanted another Mach 1 like I had in high school. So I sold that car. Guy from Kel Osel up in northeast of Nashville. I drove up, literally got to my house at like 4 o'clock in the morning, test drove it in the dark, and he liked it, took it back home. Found a Mach 1, started building it a couple of years ago, and I really hadn't just been balls to the wall like I would have been back when I was 18, 20 years old, because back then you had to work hard to just have something to drive. I travel a lot for work now, so I work on it when I feel like it when it's not too hot or not too cold. But my goal anyway is to take it on power tour. This old car, somebody had been drag racing it. The wiring harness was burned up. It had a 460, and somebody had taken and tried to use block fill, like a concrete substance. So they didn't get the block fill all the way into the block. What it did, it clogged up the water pump, or the timing cover water ports behind the water pump. It ended up deteriorating the timing cover because apparently concrete and aluminum don't mix well, or cast aluminum. It had holes in the freeze plugs, but it had homemade engine mounts. So I said, well, a friend of mine, Rodney Thornton, had an old 460, a Dove engine, the 70 model 460, and a good strong C60 had taken out of his Torino back years before. And I knew the engine, so I knew it was a good engine. Anyway, all I had to do was go back, freshen it up, new pistons, freshen up the heads. Had a Cobra Jet 429 CJ hydraulic cams. You have to put that back in it. Bought the Christ engine mounts to make it set properly. That's kind of where it is now. I had a bunch of rust. I had to replace strut rod cross member, one of the battery tray fender apron on that side from the rust. And I've just been putting it back together slowly. So that's kind of where you see me on the build of that car. Yeah, it's slow, it's boring, it's not the going out and finding will it crank, will it run every week. But I don't have 500,000 subscribers, which I'm not really looking for. Something I do just for the heck of it. I like my full-time job. I'm too old to get out case cars like that every day. But anyway, I just if in case you didn't know anything about it. By the way, if anybody wants I have a birthmark, if somebody didn't notice. And it's since birth. Well, I've had people ask me my whole life what it was, and so I figured if anybody was curious, I'd just let them know. But I don't know everything there is to know about cars. I know a lot about old stuff. Modern cars, I know nothing about them. I don't have a whole lot of interest in learning about them. Fuel injection, I don't know anything. I don't know the components enough to matter. I understand some of it, but look, even as an electrician, going back through and using a paintless wiring harness is not as simple as it might sound initially, but it also helps if you start with a car that hadn't been butchered. The car I got, like I say, it had been drag raced. A lot of the wiring had been cut out and used, toggle switches and push buttons, and there'd been some wire damage before where wires had melted together in the harness, and the fuse box was bad at best. So that's why I went ahead and put a new wiring harness in it. I'm in the middle of that right now, taking my time, no big hurry. Oh, shoulder's bad, back hurts. So I can't crawl around inside the car like I used to. But my goal was last year to take it on power tour. This year, I will take it on power tour. The only thing that really hadn't worked out yet, besides when I get the wiring finished, is the transmission. I'm not 100% sure about the condition of it. I think it may have a manual valve body. I haven't had the pan off of it. It was a transmission that came in the car, and I could drive it down the road, but I also have a ratchet shifter. I don't have a kick-down linkage or anything like that hooked up to it, so I'm still not 100% sure. I've only driven it about 25 miles an hour, so I don't know if it has a manual valve body or if it's still original. But I'll have to take care of that. I've got a couple of the transmissions in the shop. One come out of a race truck, so I don't know if the condition fit. The other one came out of that Torino that the engine was in front of, the 460 that I'm running now. By the way, give a shout out to Julio, machine shop there in Atlantic, Alabama, for taking care of a few things for me on my engine, my machine shop, machine work, heads and stuff. Um, put my pistons on, connecting the rest of my pistons on the rods. You know, guys does really good machine work, does it on time, gets it when you need it. But anyway, and I got the rear end seat. I don't know if it's, I haven't pulled the chunk. I don't know if it's a mini spool or if the spider gear's been welded together or what, but I know both tires pull. I want to get that out and get like a 300 street gear that I can drive 70, 75 mile an hour and boogie on down the road and use the torque, the horsepower that the 460 has to. I'm not looking to drag race the car. I mean, if I put it on a quarter-mile track, you know, it'd be fun. But I just want to drive it, play, have something, you know, different to drive. I'm not. Well, 2020 Mustang about, I don't know, a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago. It's 2020, only had 5,100 miles on it. And I drove it for, I don't know, a little less than a year. I only put 3,800 miles on it, something like that, in almost a year. And I didn't need a car like that. If you ain't driving it, don't have it. So anyway, I just kind of want to just go out there and get on the live. And I see where 3 whole people have tuned in. So if anybody has any, you know, any questions besides hi, or well, hi back to everybody that did say hi. Have any questions? Feel free to ask me. I'm just driving. I've got about 3 more hours to go to get to the job site. So anyway, that's almost a 30-minute video of just rambling on and saying not a whole lot. But anyway, if you like the video, give me a like. And if you found this by accident, hey, give me a subscribe. Y'all have a good day. Now, how do you end this thing? Well, the loss is, thankfully, when I first started, like I said, there was a friend of my dad's was a mechanic, and he showed me how to build an engine. A lot of it I learned on my own. Also, a lot I learned just doing general maintenance. Well, construction. My dad was an electrician, but you know, I learned how to use tools. But I remember tinkering on stuff like my dirt bike when I was a kid. You know, we built bicycles from junk we picked up in the back alleys in the neighborhood. And I worked in the cotton mill after I dropped out of college. I spent a little time in the cotton mill working in the maintenance shop, doing carpentry, learned to weld some, you know, some sheet metal work. You know, they didn't let us fool around the machine shop, but I had some friends that were machinists that I picked up some stuff from. And actually later on took a couple of machine shop classes while I was in college, or my second time around. But hey, just get started. I mean, find an old piece of junk. I know it's hard to find old stuff, vintage stuff like what we had in the 80s. You know, you can find a Camaro for $600 or $800. You know, an early Camaro, and you know, something that would cost $10,000 now that was junk. But yeah, just get started. Go do it. If you know, if you have the resources, go to Harbor Freight or Walmart or somewhere, just buy you a cheap set of tools and you start knocking it out. If you're a young guy and you have access to a automotive program in your high school, or look, even the military. I mean, there's a lot of mechanic jobs. I was in the National Guard and we were a mechanic shop, wheel vehicle, light track mechanics. You know, it's there's a lot of options out there. Appreciate you asking though. For real, that's one reason I didn't. I mean, I could have bought a built Mach 1, like, a finished one. I would have had to dig deep for the cash to buy it. I couldn't justify spending 30,000 plus on the car I wanted. So that's when I found this Mach 1 I've got for. I want to say I gave a little over three for it, and it would crank up. But like I say, I've never really driven it more than just a quarter mile down from the end of the driveway. It might have just turned it around and drove back to the house because the turn signals weren't working. The brakes still needed some work. I was losing pressure on the pedal, which is probably because it weren't bled properly. I was just bleeding it myself. But yeah, it's crazy what the car market, especially a Dodge or any Mopar Chargers, the gosh, the Super Bs, the 68 through 70 bodies. It's crazy what those things are going for, and you couldn't hardly give them away in the 80s. I appreciate you hanging in there. Well, look, I think to go ahead and sign off. I'm coming into a construction zone. I don't want to be distracted going through it, especially being a DOT vehicle. So, anyway, y'all have a good day. Take care.